This is Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, the money coach. I am the CEO and co-founder of AskTheMoneyCoach.com and Money Coach University. Those of you who know me here on Facebook probably are like, oh, wait a minute, there's two people there tonight. And yes, I'm going to introduce my friend Bill Flagg in just a moment. But I wanted to share with you guys just a little tease, a little preview of what we have in store for you tonight, because we're going to have a conversation about home ownership. And that's a super critical topic in 2021 and beyond. And a lot of us have been on that kind of doorstep. We've been thinking about, should I buy a house right now? I know the pandemic is going on. It seems to be abating a little bit. We've got the vaccines rolling out. And some folks just want to know, like, is this a good time to buy or not? And so we want to answer some of those questions for you. We want to tell you about some of the challenges, some of the ways in which you can overcome whatever obstacles you might be facing. And some of it might just be a lack of information. And so certainly on that front, when it comes to information, I've brought out the big guns for you tonight. I've brought out, I think, probably the top real estate expert in the country that I know of. Certainly those of you who might be in the neck of the woods where I used to live in Northern Jersey, some of you actually might be familiar with him. His name is Bill Flagg, and he is a real estate veteran. He's a professional who was licensed and got his broker's license back in 1985. Bill has 38 years of experience in the business. He's closed over 3,000 transactions. So I think we've got a little bit of expertise here, just a little bit, a lot if we really want to be honest. And so Bill is a broker associate, and that's a NAR designation, NAR being the National Association of Realtors. And basically that means that those folks who have that designation can open their own office. And so that's just a little bit of his, titles and credentials. Let me share a couple of other ones because they were quite impressive. And I want to give a brother his props. So in addition to being a broker associate, Bill has a number of other designations, which I think, again, are relevant for the conversation that we're having. Not only does he have that 38 years worth of experience that I mentioned, he holds these designations as well. Certified residential specialist, certified residential broker manager, at home with diversity, and commitment to excellence designation as well. Again, all of these are credentials, are designations from the National Association of Realtors. And for anybody who's going to be in the market for a house, thinking about getting your first home, et cetera, I definitely want to encourage you to, in fact, have a realtor, have a professional working with you to help you to navigate any number of issues that are going to come up in the home ownership, buying, searching process. And you're talking to somebody who loves real estate because some of you know that Earl and I have made real estate one of the corners of our own wealth building plan. We own our house here in the suburbs of Houston. We moved from Northern New Jersey, which is where Bill is located. And we are now in the northwest suburbs of Houston. And we own this house and we own 7 other properties across the country. I should say something else about Bill because some of you, might think like, okay, well, I'm not in Northern New Jersey and that's where he is. My brother is connected, okay? He actually has a vast network and can connect home buyers and sellers, frankly, with realtors, real estate professionals right in your own area. In fact, we called upon him in the Houston area as well, in Texas, in different parts when we were looking for other areas. So he has a really strong network. And if you want a referral somewhere along the line, I'm telling you, Bill Flagg can help you to find somebody if you don't work with him directly. So without further ado, I've kind of talked a little bit here at the top to set the stage and to tell you guys what the conversation is going to be about. I want you to know that we're using Zoom, the platform, of course, that everybody's using, and most of us have used more than once during this COVID-19 outbreak. We're talking via Zoom, but we're live streaming on Facebook. So I have my social media manager Tasha, who's helping us out tonight as well, she is going to be compiling your questions and your comments too. I'll duck in and out a little bit back and kind of go off of my Zoom screen here and peek a little bit on Facebook once or twice. But for the most part, he and I are just going to have a great conversation and talk. And I'm going to ask him some questions. I'm going to give you some tips and give you some pointers along the way too. But I do want you to go ahead and post on Facebook. Post your questions, and at the end of our conversation, our dialogue, we're going to take your questions. I'm going to go through the list of some of them, and we'll answer them. Either Bill will answer, or I will answer, or we'll both jump right in and get you guys the information that you want about becoming a homeowner. Okay, so we've kind of set the stage here. The first question that I wanted to ask you, Bill, because you've been a real estate professional and a realtor for so long, I wanted to know what you kind of saw as the top mistake that people make. What is the number one mistake that people make when they are trying to buy that first house?
Well, the first mistake I see, and I see it a lot, people are not ready. They're putting the cart before the horse. They're not pre-approved before they start looking. And some people have what we call champagne taste and a beer budget. When you get out there and you start looking and you start up high, you can't come down to where you're really at. And that like puts a damper on the whole process. But that is a very common mistake that I see a lot, that people don't take the time to put things in the right order. That's the thing that I always recommend, is you got to follow the first few steps before you really start seriously looking buying a house. You have to be ready. And one good example I can give from that was last year, about a year ago, this time, I had a foreclosure fixer-upper listing in South Orange, New Jersey, which is a very nice upscale area. And the house was so bad, I mean, you couldn't even see the house from the front. The trees were covering the house. It needed like $200,000 worth of work. And, I got a call from a buyer, a young couple, the husband worked in New York in finance, and they had this and they had that. They had a pre-approval letter, but they didn't have a pre-approval letter for a $200,000 rehab. So what happened is they got there, they were interested, they wanted to put in the bid, and they did put in the bid. But the problem was they were only qualified for the amount of the house at $551,000 and not the $200,000. So then they were mad at me because, it was 20 offers and we couldn't match the other offers because they couldn't qualify for that amount. So that just drives the point home. You really have to follow the steps and make sure that you're ready and you're qualified before you start looking.
Well, that whole idea of having, champagne taste, but kind of a beer, budget. I think a lot of people who've been out in the market looking for homes probably will say, I've done that before, even if they were just looking out of curiosity, to say, I just like to look at houses. I like to go to open houses. That was certainly me a lot of times. And I don't know, sometimes you might get a little spoiled. You start to see like, wow, you're looking at these little McMansions or practically $1 million homes. And then you're like, when you go to see what you can afford in your budget, that's a whole different story. So maybe we shouldn't spoil ourselves that way, or kind of prejudice our minds into thinking, well, they had the nice chandeliers and the granite and the whatever. So kind of know your range there. Now I was saying in the beginning about your title and your designations, and so before we go a little bit more into the whole process and kind of what people should be looking for and thinking about in this market, because it is a lot of hot markets. You were talking about that house that had 20 some odd offers on it even last year. I just wanted you to talk about the role that a realtor can play and what a professional can do for a home buyer, because right now I feel like we're in the pandemic still, and everything is being done, so much is being done remotely, online, virtually. Of course, this conversation is taking place remotely. And if I'm not mistaken, most home buyers do. They hop online, they go to some website first, and then they're starting the search. And maybe some of them are just like, I can do this myself. I can just, figure it all out on my own. But I don't know, I feel like a realtor, a professional, really helps you to navigate, so many challenges seen and unseen. So maybe speak a little bit to what a professional like yourself and others can do for a home buyer in today's market.
Okay, well, as you just said, it's very easy to go online and search for homes. I mean, in this day and age, everything is online. Everything is like, Netflix and Amazon, and everything is quick and easy. And that has changed a lot, because in 1982, when I started in real estate, there was not even a real estate book. There was real estate index cards that the real estate agents got, once a week. And then we went from the index cards, we went to MLS books. And then when the market was hot, by the time we got the book, half of the inventory in the book was already sold. And then to the MLS in its early stages online. And now we graduated to the point where all these listing portals have all the information that's in the MLS. So the role of the agent is not so much being the guardian of the listings, it's being the coach and the advisor and the counselor, because that's where you need a realtor. You don't need a realtor to just shop for a house. You need a realtor to do the important parts for you, to help you know what the good points and the bad points of a house or a neighborhood are, and how to negotiate. That's the biggest thing you get from a realtor, and one with experience is going to give you a better transaction in the end. You're going to come out with a better result on your price and your terms, because that's the most important part of the whole process, is negotiating the offer. And then also being a resource provider, because there's so many different pieces to the transaction. So we provide service providers, and we provide, recommendations of certain things that you'll need based on your home inspection and based on the results of everything that is part of the transaction. So our biggest role is more of an advisor and an access provider to information that you wouldn't have normally, but you do have so much information. Like I said, most of the buyers already know everything about the town, everything about the school system, everything about the demographics. That's what the buyers are supposed to do. You do all that stuff, and you search for a neighborhood, and you find something that makes you and your family a comfortable place that you want to live for 10 to 20 or however many years you're going to live there. So our role is more of an advisor and a negotiator and a coach.
I love that idea. And I hadn't heard anybody put it to me that way: a coach, an advisor, a counselor, and a negotiator to help you get the best, price and terms. I love that. Very, very well put. You mentioned something earlier, Bill. You said a pre-approval. You said when people are trying to jump in there too quick, they don't even have a pre-approval. Let's tell our audience a little bit about what that pre-approval letter does for you, kind of what it means and how it can maybe give a buyer the leg up on the competition, especially in a hot market. And maybe touch a little bit on, like, what's the difference between the pre-approval letter and the pre-qualification letter? Because I've sort of heard both terms, and I know some people might use them interchangeably.
Yeah, no, they're definitely not both the same. A pre-approval letter means the lender who you're working with has verified your income and your assets, in addition to your credit report. So those three things are needed from a lender to give you a pre-approval. So a pre-qualification just means you talk to somebody over the phone and you told them what you made and how much money you have in the bank, and you have. So that's the difference between.
Tell us that pre-qualification letter is not worth really much. That is, it's not worth the ink. It's kind of what the paper is printed on there.
No, what I call it is the toilet paper pre-approval.
The toilet paper. Okay, so the pre-approval is real deal. Now the banker has verified the information that you said: income, assets, credits. And so they're like, yes, this person will qualify for a loan of X size. So that's the real deal, getting that pre-approval letter. I remember back in the day when, well, I guess you can still obviously do it right now too, but certainly I bought my first home in my 20s, and I had lived in apartments my whole life, growing up in Los Angeles. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I bought a house, first in Philadelphia. But I do remember a time when you could just get online and put in the basic information, then you just get a pre-qualification letter. And of course they still do that today. You could just get it printed out right then and there. So yeah, it's pretty easy. Like, anybody can get a pre-qualification letter, but can you get pre-approved? That's a whole nother story. So,
yeah, no, when you're pre-approved, you can go into a contract with confidence, knowing that the lender is going to close your loan. I mean, right. They do a lot of automated underwriting these days. So, have all your information and they verified it and they put it in the system, 15 minutes later, they have automated underwriting approval. So that's really the way to go in this market, because this market is so crazy. If you don't have a pre-approval and you're trying to buy a house and make an offer, they're not even going to listen to your offer without a pre-approval.
Now that's an important point to know. You guys hear that, right? So if you go in and you're trying to make an offer on a property, the seller is going to be looking at you like, who? Like, you don't have a pre-approval letter? You haven't done the basics. Like he said, you haven't come prepared with the right vetting that shows that, yes, your information has been confirmed and verified, and you have the capacity, you have the financial wherewithal, the credit standing, the savings, et cetera, to be able to follow on and to, execute on the purchase. So get that pre-approval letter. So that's good to know. Okay. Since you mentioned also about the kind of champagne taste, and the beer budget, I like the analogy there. What should people know? Like the average first-time home buyer, they've never been through the process before. So they're like, I don't know, how much can I afford? Or what should they know about, keeping it realistic, keeping it real, and being, to know like, okay, I like houses in this neighborhood, or I like this area. I've heard there's a good school district. But how can people, prevent themselves from going out into houses that they know they have no business looking at because they can't really afford the taxes, the mortgage in that priced area? How does the average person who's never done this before know, okay, this is how much house I can actually afford?
Well, that all goes back to a basic, you as the money coach, you're the pro on this. So this is more of a question for you, but basically you do like a budget, and you don't have to necessarily spend all the amount of qualification that you qualify for in your mortgage, but you have to take it from a monthly payment, from an initial monthly payment, what you're comfortable with paying, and knowing that based on your income, they use different ratios. Whether you're going conventional, they use 28% front end and 36% back end, or if FHA, they can go up to 55% on the back end, but you don't necessarily want to spend 55% of your monthly income on a mortgage, because that's not going to leave a whole lot for anything else. But it's basically going through the financial review of what your income is, what your debts are, what your liabilities are, and they put it all into the mix and they come up with the ratios. But really, it all depends on your comfort level with the monthly payment, because you're not buying a house for $300,000. You're buying a house and you're putting a little money down and you're paying the monthly payment, and that's what you got to focus on.
And let me add something here too, because he said a couple of things. I want to jump in with some terminology here just to make sure everybody is staying with us. Like you referenced MLS before. That's the multiple listing service, for you guys who might have been wondering about that. And also he was talking about ratios, front end and back end ratios. And yes, Bill is correct that lenders are going to be asking you, how much debt do you have? They're going to pull your credit report to see how much debts you have. And they're going to assess your debt to income ratio. And they're going to take a look at front end and back end ratios. The front end refers to all your bills, like what the stuff that you owe, your credit card payments, your student loan payments, anything that's a obligation that has 12 months really or more that you still have to pay on. They're going to want to know what are those debts that you have to pay. Then they're going to add in on the back end, they're going to also add in your housing costs as well. So the back end ratio is really looking at the totality, all your debts, housing included, the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, to be able to say, okay, could you afford this house? And I know that a lot of lenders don't like to see payment shock, right? They don't like to see that you might go from, oh, I'm renting and my rent is $1,250 a month, but now all of a sudden I'm going to go to a house that is $2,000 a month, or $1,800 plus a month, and you're getting a 50+% jump in your housing alone. Now you might have the financial wherewithal to handle that, and it may work out for you just fine. But in general, I know that lenders are also going to be looking at, okay, if we think about this person who was paying, I don't know, $1,000 a month, and now they're going to having a house note that's $2,500 a month. Woo, that's a lot of payment shock. So they probably want to kind of rein you in a little bit on that front. Let's talk a little bit about two people who are house hunting. Bill, I'm sure you must have come across this situation. And I know people see all these home improvement shows and, they wrap it up nicely in 30 minutes. And it's like, okay, we're finding our house. We look at 1, 2, 3. This is the one we want. But if there's a couple involved and one party has certain tastes or likes or things they're looking for, and then the other person is like, I don't care about that. I'm thinking about the storage. I'm thinking about whether there's a 2-car garage. I'm thinking about the nuts and bolts of the house or whatever. And maybe the other person is thinking about, oh, it's so nice and pretty. And what's the kitchen look like? And how's the cabinetry and whatever, I don't know. But my question is, how do you get couples on the same page when they want something vastly different, but they're looking for a house that clearly they're both going to live in?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it comes up a lot. And as a married couple, you know about that stuff.
Yes, indeed.
We don't always agree on everything. So you have to like compromise, just like you do when you're married, or if you're in a relationship, you have to give and take. And the first thing you have to decide on is the location. Based on where you work and where all your interests are, and how you live your life. That's the first thing, is you got to narrow down a location, and then you take it to the next level as far as how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. Do I have to have a man cave? Do I have to have a chef's kitchen? Do I have to have a music room? Or you have to really go through together, and before you start, after you go out one or two times, it gets a little clearer to you, because before you start looking, you really don't know exactly what you want, because you really don't. You just hear about things and you see things online, but you have to actually go out and feel it and touch it, and then you can move on and figure out our wants and needs and our must-haves, because that's what you can't negotiate on. You cannot negotiate on your must-haves. You have to come up with first, and then you can negotiate on wants and needs and features and things like that.
So you got to kind of know your deal breakers. Like I have to have an open layout. I have to have like you said, a chef's kitchen, or a 2-car garage, or whatever it is, the thing that for you is like crucial and you must have. Then the other stuff you might say, like, okay, honey, I can, if you want that, and it's really not important to me, but if you want it, fine, kind of thing. So distinguishing between those needs and wants and compromise, yeah, that helps in a relationship on all things. So Bill, let me ask you this too, just as a kind of a bit of a follow-up to that question, because again, couples are going to, have different tastes and whatnot. Is it okay? You said they won't know until they, kind of go out, right? So, how when you go into, I'm sure you've had this experience with some buyers, when you go into a house and you feel it, like you just said, and you feel like, this is it, are you able to tell as a realtor when you're like, you might have taken a couple or an individual around, you might have shown them 5 houses, 25 houses, 50 houses, I don't know. And hopefully it's not 50, but, but are you able to tell, like, once you get to know your clients and know, okay, it's checking off all the boxes, either if it's an individual or a couple, and are you able to go, oh, I know they're going to love this house? Or when you see their face, some people might, have a poker face, but do you know when it's like for the client, like, that's the one, like we know as buyers, when we walk in and we have that feeling like, oh my God, this is my house, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, you just mentioned about like checking off the boxes. After they figure out their wants and needs and must-haves, then, you put the grid in for every house, you check the boxes. But after you've shown them different houses, you get their feedback and you see their body language. And, sometimes after you know all of that and you find a house or they find a house and you look at all the information and the pictures and you're like, yeah, they're going to like this house. And then when they walk in, they're like, it's better, especially when a woman walks in the kitchen. That's the number one right there. The woman walks in the kitchen, she's like, oh, this is it.
Done.
Done. Yep.
That happened here too, I would say. Well, it was the spiral staircase for me. It was done then, but yeah. So that's good to know. I mean, like, and I do think that that's part of a real estate professional, knowing a client and just knowing like, these are their must-haves, these are what the needs are, and even what the wants are, because sometimes the wants will drive, for some couples, of course, or for some individuals, will drive the decision-making along the way there. So what about couples who are trying to negotiate, as you said, in a hot market? I mean, you said that clearly, like you gave that example off the top of the couple who, they didn't account for the $200,000 worth of repairs that needed to be done. So they didn't have the right kind of pre-approval, and they, wouldn't be able to afford the house. But you told me earlier this idea about sending a love letter to a seller. And, let's tell folks what that love letter means. I guess it's something you're going to use, obviously, in a hot market. But what does the love letter do? And basically, what should the love letter to a seller say? What's the purpose behind it?
Well, the purpose behind it is to try to make a personal connection to the seller. You try to find something in common that you see in the seller's house that you can relate to the seller about. And, you make it nice and flowery and emotional. And, you're pitching, because in this market, everything is multiple offers. Pretty much half everything on the market sells in less than 3 weeks, and there's multiple offers. So you're competing with other people for the same house. So what's going to make your offer stand out? I mean, there's several things. I mean, you want to be flexible, give them the most flexibility as far as to when the closing date will be, because when someone sells a house, they have to buy another house, and they haven't bought it yet because they need the money from this house to buy that house. Mm-hmm. So you have to be flexible in that. And you have to understand that the most important thing is not always the money, but it's the other things like the contingency. Some people will waive all inspections, which is not a smart thing to do, but some people are just desperate because they're tired of getting beat out so much that they will waive the inspections, or they will waive the appraisal. If the property doesn't appraise, they will pay the difference with the financing. And people are going, I mean, I can give you one example. One house in South Orange that is just under contract and ready to close. I sold to a young couple. The property was on the market. We made an appointment. We went to show it. I called it, you talk about people that want it, and they go in, these people, oh yeah, we want it. So I called the agent. All right, well, I have a buyer wants to send an offer, can I send it to you? She's like, well, we just accepted the contract today. It's at the attorney's office.
Oh my gosh.
So this was 2 years ago. The house was listed for $459, and it was multiple offers, and they had a contract accepted from the same listing office. But my buyer wanted it so bad, he offered $63,000 over the list price.
Wow.
And we sent the offer into the attorney, and the agent called back the next day, and she said, yeah, the seller wants to accept your offer.
I guess so.
Yeah, so they killed the contract that they already signed in attorney. Wow. And they accepted theirs.
If somebody came and told me $63,000 over my $459 asking price, 63, those 10 to a little under 15% over asking price. Yeah, I would have said, let me get this extra 63,000 too. Now I don't know if I had the contract in hand, but that person was. They probably was looking at every out they had. If they had a 24-hour period to change their mind, I don't know what contingency they had to be able to get out of that other signed contract. But again, that's where I guess a real estate professional realtor like yourself will be able to navigate and tell the client what's, how to get through that situation.
But how we won, how we won the seller over was the love letter. And, I told them, you got to write a letter that's going to make the seller accept your offer. And somehow the wife worked at an auction house in New York, and the seller had some kind of art that she could relate to and kind of make it personal. And, and they wrote the letter, oh, this is a great place for us to have a family and have kids, and the kids can play in the backyard, and we can go snow sledding across the street on the hill over there. And, you have to make it personal. You have to connect in any way you can, so you can find some commonality with the seller to make them, feel for you and your personality and your family. I mean, fast forward, the same house. The guy calls me about a month ago. He's like, yeah, Bill, I just took a new job in Dallas. I've never been there before, but I was tired with my job in New York, and they didn't give me a promotion, so I'm moving. I want you to list my house. So this is the same house we're talking about. So fast forward 2 years later, we listed the house for $559, and they had just bought it for like $526, 2 years ago. So we listed at $559, and the strategy I tell sellers is to list the property at market value in this market, because there's so many buyers and there's not enough inventory. You'll do better to price the house at market value versus overprice it and have to come down later. So you put it on at the market value, which they did, and in 1 week we had like 20 offers, and again the same thing. It sold again for $41,000 over the price. So this same house in 3 years sold for $108,000 over the list price. And the buyer of the house on this end gave my sellers a love letter, but they even took it further. They took a picture of the family with the little kids and the whole thing.
Oh.
that could backfire on you. I mean, I wouldn't always recommend that, but
I understand.
Yeah.
I totally understand. You want to go there?
No, but
Okay, so because I know that even as a seller, sometimes they tell you to depersonalize your home so that a buyer could envision themselves or their family in the house. So sometimes like the photos and the images are not necessarily the best to have as a seller, or I guess now if you're doing a love letter, to give a photo of you as a buyer, just let the seller envision whoever they want to envision as, oh, this nice couple, this nice family, they'll have their kids sledding and whatever it is that they want to envision. If they can have that personal connection, human nature being what it is, we all kind of have what's called affinity factors, right? We tend to gravitate towards or like, or generally speaking, connect with people who are like us in some way. So whether it's, oh, this family was also into art, whether it's, oh, this person is the same, goes to the same type of church or is faith-based group or looks like me, or, is, a couple with young kids like me, or whatever the thing is for the basis of connection. You don't want to ruin that by kind of over, I guess, selling it, and taking away a little bit of that mystique. So be careful on that front.
But another thing, no, just to add on to that, this buyer who was brave enough to put their picture of the family and put it on their love letter, this has got to be the record for the most years and the most houses that they lost in multiple offers. The agent told me that he was working with them for 5 years. They took 1 year off. They made 9 multiple offers and they lost until they won on the 10th one. That's a record that I've never seen.
Wow, that is incredible.
After 4 or 5, most people would give up. These people kept pursuing, but they had to live in this one area where this house was. So that's why it kept selling for more than the asking price, because you could walk to the train station, you could walk to the downtown, you had the park right across the street, you had the pool, the tennis courts, and all that stuff right there.
I know South Orange well. I used to live in West Orange, and then in Mountainside. We actually kept our property in Mountainside, and we still have it. But you know what? We might have to think about selling. The market's getting like crazy like that.
I think next year is a good time. About a year from now, I think after that, it's going to get back to normal. More listings are going to be on the market. It's going to return more to a balanced market. But it's another thing. The market is very swayed to the sellers right now. A normal market has a 5-month inventory supply that's balanced. So you have 5 months is a normal market where it takes 5 months for all the houses on the market to sell. So right now, nationally, we have a 1.5 month inventory supply.
Oh, wow. Very, very
tight. And in some markets like where I am, where there's no houses and it's a small town, it's a half a month.
Whoa. So
you put your house in the market and then the next day you got 10 offers and that's it. That's how dry the market is right now. It's supply and demand. And when you understand supply and demand, you know why people go crazy and they spend top dollar to buy something, because the demand is high.
Again, everybody, he's dropping pearls of wisdom here. We want to pause for a moment and recognize some of the wisdom that Bill Flagg is sharing with us on the supply and demand front. Definitely something to keep in mind when you think about inventory. And across the country, we know that there's like a shortage of affordable housing nationwide. But of course, all real estate is local, right? And so you need to know what's going on in your specific market. But this concept of supply and demand is an important one that he's referencing here. So I want to make sure that you guys are really getting this. If there is a tight supply, if there's a limited supply of something, there's scarcity. And so what happens when you have a reduction in supply? There's a elevation or raising of the prices. If you have a glut of supply, if there's like a ton of things on the market for anything that's for sale, certainly for homes, if there's too many homes on the market, then you're going to see prices come down. It works in the opposite direction, right? So just think about that in the neighborhood, in the community, in the area that you're looking at. What is inventory like, and what is the typical sales time to get rid of, say, all the homes in that particular area? Bill was saying 5 months is just like a normal, what was the phrase you used, Bill?
Balanced market.
A balanced market, right. Yes. So in other words, it would take 5 months time, or 150 days roughly, to get rid of all of the homes listed in a particular area. So 5 months, now you take it down to a month and a half, 45 days, those homes are gone. And in the market that he was talking about, even half a month, 15 days, again, those homes are just, flying off the shelves and having multiple offer situations. One question I wanted to ask you, Bill, because there are a lot of hot markets, all around the country. Again, I live in the northwest suburbs of Houston. I know our house here, I think I shared with you before we got on this live, that our house here has gone up almost 20% just in a year and a half since we've been here. And I'm like, woo, and we paid the mortgage down even more. So I was like, great, we're building a lot of equity in this property. So I'm glad about that. But I know my daughter lives in Austin, hot market.
Yes.
And her and her husband are going to be looking to buy another place right around the summer. But they're definitely looking at the way in which the market is just, heating up in so many areas. So I had a question about, what people, just strategies and what people should be doing when they're in that hot market of wherever they might be. And about whether it's advisable to how strong you should come in with that first offer. You mentioned obviously a couple of sort of extreme cases where they were like, I'm going for it. I want that house and I'm gonna pay $63,000 extra. Now I know you're not gonna recommend people, go like that. Apparently this guy really wanted it. But is that kind of a no-no, just overbidding, or is it something good, a strategy? I can tell you that I've done it before. There was one property, and we of course still have the property that we wanted in Raleigh, and I was like, I'm getting this property. I want this property, and I was outbid before, but I had done the comps, and I knew it was a little undervalued, and I was willing, if it didn't appraise, I was willing to pay that difference. And again, just to explain to you guys, a lender is not going to loan or give you a mortgage because they are looking at the loan to value. The loan being, say, if it's an 80% loan to value, that means you've put down 20%, right? A lender is not going to give you a loan that exceeds the value of the property, right? They're not going to exceed their LTV guidelines, their loan to value guidelines. So in our case, we were putting down a strong down payment. And I knew the property was a little bit, underpriced. And if it didn't appraise at the number that we were offering, I would have been prepared to pay the difference, knowing that the bank was not going to give me a loan for that. As it turns out, it appraised higher than what I even paid for it. So it worked out just fine. But Bill, talk a little bit about like bidding strategies maybe, and when a person should or shouldn't go in strong with an offer, and how strong that offer should be. Should they overbid, or is that a no-no?
Well, right now, it's not a no-no, because if you really want to buy a house and you've been looking, half the people have been beat out already in multiple offer situations. You know what your comfort level is in monthly payment. You know what your budget is. You know what you're comfortable with. As long as you're comfortable with that, and you're comfortable in your job security and knowing that you're going to be able to pay this mortgage, even if you have to pay a little more in time, and it's been proven over the years, real estate will always appreciate. It might come down, you might hit another little dip, but in the end, it's always going to appreciate. And, the value of living in the home, getting the tax benefits and the enjoyment of the home and the pride of ownership is more than enough reasons to go for it if you want to go for it. But, if you're a buyer in this market, you really have to be aggressive, and you have to, understand. We tell people all the time, when you're making your highest and best offer, you make the love letter and you go to sleep at night knowing that if you lose tomorrow, when they tell us, you lost a bid, you put your best foot forward. You don't want to come up short and say, a lot of people would say after the deadline, oh, I want to raise my offer. Well, it's too late. That's why they call it a highest and best deadline, because you have one chance, like everybody else, to make your highest and best offer by the deadline. So that's the way.
Highest and best. They're serious about that.
Yeah, oh yeah, very serious. But it's a good strategy for sellers, because they know they have the upper hand, and they know that, like I said, if they price it at the market, they're going to get way over, and the buyer's desires is only going to tell how much over they're going to get. But if you're a buyer in this market and you really want to buy a house, you have to put your best foot forward. And like I said, even if it's a little bit more than what you want to spend, at least you won and you got it. and you're going to move, and you're going to enjoy, home ownership, and like I said, the tax benefits and the pride of ownership and everything else. But it's like playing sports. You have to want to win. You have to put yourself in a position to win. And like when you lose, and you lose a tough game, well, I gave it my best, but I didn't win this game, but I tried.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, Bill, if you might talk about, since we're gearing this conversation towards, the prospective first-time home buyer. I know that there's first-time home buyer programs out there. Maybe just comment a little bit generally on some programs that can help people, or just the idea, the concept behind having first-time home buyer programs. I know I certainly know about these, but let's dialogue a little bit about that, because sometimes people might think, well, geez, if I'm not overbid, but if I'm gonna pay so much, can I get a little help along the way? Maybe some seller closing costs get paid for, the seller pays for some closing costs, or I guess maybe that wouldn't happen in a super hot market. It's like, you better just do your own closing costs. but I don't know. I think sometimes people don't know that there are state and local, county, programs, and even certain, some federal things that can help the first-time home buyer to help them with a down payment or on the funding side.
Yeah, there's various down payment assistance programs and grant programs through different lenders, and they're always based for low and moderate income areas. And the problem with those programs are, in this market, you have to be able to move from contract to closing in 60 days or less. And sometimes going through the process, they require home buyer counseling, and you have to meet certain criteria first before you can get the certificate to get the grant or get the down payment assistance. But I would recommend, especially in urban areas, you check with the city or the county, or even if there's special government programs, as I'm sure when the market cools down, the government is going to be doing some kind of down payment assistance. But right now, it's not needed because the properties there's not enough properties now. So imagine if the government gave everybody $15,000 to put down on a home. I mean, that would explode markets that are lower end, that are not as hot as we have right now. But there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of programs.
I know Biden is talking about that. He was talking about, and we'll see what's down the road going to happen, but about having a 10,000. It was a 10 or 15,000. I forget what
15,
the number.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah, to be able to put towards home ownership, et cetera. So we'll see what happens when that does happen, or if it happens. I'll certainly give you guys an update on it on that front. I'm gonna ask you for any other sort of final tips, and we're almost to 45 here. And after your last little commentary here, I'll take a peek at our Facebook page, and I'll see if there's some questions we want to answer that folks might have posted. But any other last minute tips or strategies or insights or anything we didn't get to cover, or and I definitely want to tell you to please tell our audience about how they can connect with you. Certainly if they're looking in the northern New Jersey area. And again, I could not recommend Bill more strongly. You'll have, as he said, a counselor, an advocate, a person to help you to negotiate, and a coach who will help you to get through the process. So, but Bill, any other final tips or any other information you want to share?
Well, one thing that as a buyer, you don't pay a commission. So if you can get the best person that has experience, that has done a lot of transactions, that has great relationships with the agent in your market, because that's another benefit of working with an experienced agent who knows the agents in the market. When you come into a multiple offer situation, your offer is going to get put over someone else's who's brand new in the business and doesn't really have the experience. So if you're not paying a commission, when you go to doctors and lawyers, you're going to pay for whatever service you get. When you go to buy a home, you're going to get a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and a lot of advice for free because you're not paying anything. So that's just one point that a lot of people don't understand. The seller pays the commission. So the buyer gets the benefit of an expert, a coach, and a counselor to help you in making your home ownership dream come true.
That's great insight. And what he's saying is he's going to work with you guys, and it's not like you're paying him. The seller pays the commission. So I love that idea, that insight as well for folks to know about in terms of being able to work with a professional, somebody on your side, and then not have to worry like, oh my gosh, am I paying through the nose for all this expertise? So let me hop over here and start to take a look at some of the questions that we have. I'm grabbing another laptop, and we'll see, Bill, I'll share with you some of what has come through. And thank you very much, hon. My loving and supportive husband, he always comes in to save me at just the right moment. He was listening and of course heard that I said we're gonna be getting ready for questions. So he had me set up here. So one question, I see a lot of good questions. Okay, so I'll start with some of these. And Bill, you and I, we could just kind of share our perspective and our thoughts on these. So one question from Caitlin, she said, my fiance and I have been looking for a house since November of last year and have been outbid on 7 offers so far. 5% down, well above asking price, and we're still struggling. It's hard not to get discouraged. Do you have any tips in mind for us that you'd be willing to share with us?
Well, the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is you have to be a little more flexible, I guess, in the location where you are and, the type of house. Maybe it might be better for you to find a house that's a fixer-upper that, the market may be rejecting it, but you can see potential in it, and, you can get a renovation loan or, some kind of, you can buy and fix the home with one loan. That might be another, avenue to look into, because, everything that's normal, that's even average condition, is going to fly. And if you're putting 5% down, you can't compete with 20% down, or you can't compete with cash. And, that's a problem that, a lot of people are facing. And I can sympathize, with your dismay, but I wouldn't give up. I wouldn't lose faith. It just takes time. As I said in the example, one buyer, it took them on their 10th buy. So you still got 3 more to go. You'll get there.
Yeah. Caitlin, let me piggyback on that and just add and say 1 or 2 things. The 5% thing initially struck me too, because I was thinking, okay, a seller, from a seller's perspective, they're going to see, these people said they're going to put down 20% versus this buyer who said that they want to put down 5%. And from the seller's perspective, they're probably thinking this is going to be a stronger buyer who's more likely to get the deal done. So that might be one of the reasons. And of course, I get it that, I don't know what price house you're looking at, but let's say it's $300,000. Well, 10% of $300,000 is $30,000. 5% is $15,000, right? So I get it that you might be like, ooh, I don't have another $15,000. I can't double the payment that I already have. But maybe you can, like, again, I don't know what area you're looking at, but maybe that whole idea of having or looking into whether or not you can get a grant or some assistance that would bolster your down payment, that would turn it into from 5% to 10%, or being flexible, as Bill mentioned, in terms of the type of house, not just the pristine or the kind of ready to, walk in, move in condition property, something that if you can see your way to that, to say, this is a little diamond in the rough, and there's not as much competition, and other people might not see the beauty in that type of property. But also in terms of tips, I want to share something emotional with you, right? Everything in its time and everything in the right season. So don't be discouraged because as of now, to date, the right house hasn't presented itself, the right opportunity hasn't come your way. Some things do take a little more time and a little more patience when you're working with specific scenarios and specific circumstances. So do stay encouraged. And if you're firm and if you know, like, this is our budget, this is the range that we're in, this is the area that we want to be in, and this is what we can afford, then maybe it's about being patient and waiting for the right time, or even waiting for a little bit of a cycle to happen. Because right now, as Bill was suggesting, we're in so much of a seller's market. where clearly the sellers have the upper hand. So, okay, I hope that helps.
Lynnette, let me add one more thing to that.
Sure.
You know, we're finding a very common thing in first-time buyers, and you said your fiance, so that means, you know, you're getting married. We recently sold a house to a couple, and a lot of parents are giving them gifts. So, you know, if you only have 5% down, if you have parents, if you get married, you know, you get the gifts before you get married, and you use that as part of your down payment, and that might help you out.
That's a really good idea. Let me go on to the next question. And this question is actually from my brother-in-law, Chris. He actually asked two questions, and we'll hit each one very quickly. Maybe I'll take the first one and you take the second one. So he asked, is buying real estate overseas a safe investment? And then he asked about the COVID pandemic and how, you know, will that affect the buyer-seller market and kind of what we're seeing in terms of demand and whatnot each way. So I have not bought property overseas. However, I surely have a strong interest in it. And I've looked into it for a couple of different countries. And I can tell you this, on the financing side, if you're not going to buy the property for cash, it's trickier, because depending on the country and whatnot, most lenders who are local in the market that you might be looking at, they're not going to want to make loans to you. And even the lenders who are US based here don't typically want to give you money to loan to buy an international property. So a lot of times you might have to buy it for cash. But when you talk about, is it safe from an investment standpoint, I assume you're thinking about, you know, renting something out. When you say investment, you know, renting it out, using it for, you know, holidays, or perhaps you would go there or whatever, but you'd have it as a monthly rental. I know of people, and certainly there's, you know, organizations that'll kind of help you do this, that they actually do robust business, kind of the Airbnb type of model, where they're renting those properties out left and right. And so from a safe standpoint, yeah, I guess you pick the right property in the right market and whatnot. And I wouldn't think it would be overly risky, but I don't know, Bill, you might have anything different to say on that. But if not, you just want to tackle the other one about COVID and how the pandemic has affected buyers and sellers in this market. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just to add one little tip on the end of what you're saying, I'm not an expert on international real estate, but there's a nice island off the US called Puerto Rico that you can get very cheap. There's lots of HUD foreclosures in Puerto Rico. And, you know, if you want like a vacation place or a place that you could turn into an Airbnb, it's cheap and it's a good long-term investment. Okay, so rolling into the COVID, when it first hit a year ago, my initial thought was that it was going to crush the market because of the pandemic. No one wanted to go out. No one is you know, supposed to go outside their home. But what that did, it was kind of the opposite of what I first thought, because no one was listing their home. People still wanted to buy. The interest rates were so low. People want to buy, but there's no listing. So it was done, you know, the right way. You know, the CDC put out the protocols. Everyone wore their masks and wore their gloves. And, you know, it was like you felt like you needed extra gear to even go outside back then. It's relaxed a little bit, but we're still following the CDC protocols. But the problem with the COVID is sellers weren't selling. And the market went from this inventory to this inventory, and it just exploded.
Right.
And you know, because that house in South Orange, the investors, when they first won the bid, you know, they paid $551,000 for the house. Needed to put $200,000 into it, and the COVID hit, and the next day, the guys called me, like, Bill, you know, the bank needs to drop the price. The market's going to drop. The profit's going to drop. The market's going to drop. And you know, he asked for like $30,000 or $40,000 off, and the bank gave him like $10,000 off, take it or leave it. And he took it. And then, you know, he got an extra $10,000 because the market took off after that. So, I mean, you know, the market is still great, and it's going to get better as, you know, people relax these restrictions and we start to go back to living normal. I say by next spring, there's going to be more houses on the market. So it's not going to be as bad. And, you know, you won't have to face so many multiple offers and bidding situations. But, you know, it's going to take time. But COVID has taught us all a lot.
And I can say that from our perspective, we actually bought 3 properties during the pandemic. So we didn't slow our roll at all. And it was competition still out there. So, you know, go figure. Let me go on and let's take a couple more of these before we'll be coming up in 5 more minutes at the 8 o'clock Central Time hour, 9 o'clock Eastern. So we have another question from Shay, who said, I got my pre-approval, but I'm finding it hard to find what I'm looking for in my price range. Is it better to just wait out the market? What do you think, Bill?
It depends on, how bad do you want to own a house? Sometimes you just have to compromise. Instead of, that town where you're at fixed level, another town, maybe 5 miles away might be $20,000 or $30,000 less where you could buy. And then that comes again to like negotiating. Even if you're single, you still have to negotiate with yourself on, your wants and your needs and your must-haves. So that's approaching it.
Sometimes you got to negotiate with yourself, people. Okay. And let me say something else. I know in your industry, there's an expression, certainly if not among realtors and real estate professionals around mortgage lenders, called drive till you qualify. It basically means like go out further. If you can't, if you like right in the city, right near downtown, right near where all the action is happening, go out, drive 10 minutes, drive another 10 minutes, drive another 10 minutes, drive till you qualify, So
people were driving from New York, like Queens, out to Pennsylvania, like an hour and a half, because that's, the only way they could qualify. So if you want to buy a house, you do it. If you don't, then you won't.
So there you go on that front. This, I think, is the last question that we had here. Oh, this one is just a comment, and then we'll wrap here. We had a comment from Angela who said, it's scarce here in the Fort Hood, Harker Heights area. We made an appointment to look at a house or two, and they canceled though due to an offer already being submitted. We've lost out on 3 ideal homes that suit us. And then she said at the end, my husband was too slow to act on them because they were next to a school or near a Walmart. So they lost out on the other ones. And then they were, I guess, got slow. Maybe he got a little bit tired of losing out on those bids. But it seemed like you have to be proactive too, right, Bill? And just ready to move when the opportunity presents itself.
Yep. You got to be ready. You got to be ready. And, if you blink, you lose out.
Yep. So, okay, so we're going to wrap it up here. I want to make sure that you guys know that you can reach this amazing professional that we've had to join us for this conversation tonight. You can go to billflagg.com, and it's Flagg with 2 G's. So BILLFLAGG.com. I'm going to have that correct, right, Bill?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You can also connect via our Facebook group. There's the Money Coaches Real Estate group as well. And certainly, Bill, you're on LinkedIn as well too, correct?
Yes. Well, I'm going to share all my socials. I'll put them on your page. And I also have a bonus for everybody who tuned in. I put together like a 1-page resource, some links, some useful links and some information that you can use, whether you're buying or you're selling. And, just to help, everyone learn in their knowledge and share the knowledge. It's good to be on, and it's good to help everyone in their venture to buy real estate.
Well, that is so very kind of you. And I can see, of course, why your clients and people like me, of course, love to work with you, because you over deliver and you always want to help people in this, which is, kind of the biggest purchases that we make, when we buy properties that are, hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being put on the line, and you need someone, a professional to help you along the way. So it's 8 o'clock now, Central Time. Again, I want to thank Bill Flagg for joining us. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and feel free to continue, share this video with your friends and family, anybody you know who's looking to buy their home in 2021 or beyond. So again, I'm Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, the Money Coach. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AskTheMoneyCoach.com and Money Coach University. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. Very much appreciated.